Communication is the collaborative process of using messages to create and participate in social reality. There are four metaphors of communication: transmission, interaction, transaction, and social construction.
Models of communication was based on the workings of the telephone and radio. In this model, communication involves a linear, one-way transfer of information. A source sends a message through a channel or a medium to a receiver in an environment of noise that serves as interference with the effective transmission of a message. For example, suppose a friend is waiting for you at a restaurant and you need to let him know that you are running a few minutes late. You, the source, might transmit your message, "Be there in 15, through a channel, a text message on your mobile device, to your friend, in an environment of noise, perhaps a poor wireless signal and low battery. And it never reaches the person, and you now are the bad person because you never communicated with your friend who is now upset at you." Another example is Morse code. There is a source sender who sends a message through a channel that has an environment with interference. It is then received by a target receiver, but the receiver is passive, which means they do not reply back.
Communication as an interreaction is a two-way process in which both parties participate. Like transmission, both are still considered separate, but the receiver does give feedback. We have two examples. One is two players in a ping pong match. The server would be the sender, and then the other player would be the receiver. The net would represent an interference or a noise during the game. Then the receiver must hit back to finish his feedback. Our second example would be a phone interview in which this shows you have to compensate for the lack of face-to-face interaction. So, one must give feedback and use their field of experience. And because this communication takes place in real time, one can adapt and change accordingly.
Next is communication as transaction. The transaction metaphor of communication was introduced to acknowledge that people are connected through communication and that they accomplish something in communication that is beyond merely relaying messages back and forth. The transaction metaphor invites us to do away with the notion of a separate sender and a separate receiver. Instead, participants are simultaneous sender-receivers linked in relationship to one another. In communication, we do not only exchange messages, but also impact the people involved. Participants and their relationships emerge from communication, changed, whether in large or small ways. We have two examples for this metaphor. The first is giving a thumbs up. Though the receiver may intend this as a positive and uplifting message, the receiver may not see it this way, because in other countries, thumbs up do not necessarily mean what they do in the United States. Another one is in your tone of voice, or, for example, when you say okay. You can simply say okay, meaning I understand what you have said. However, you can also say okay and roll your eyes and show that you mean it in a sarcastic way.
Communication as a social construction has to do with influence and self-esteem. This communication reaches beyond the individuals and into the social world and translates to everyone it touches. One scenario would be a mother who grooms her daughter into thinking that she must always look pretty, know how to clean, and cook a good meal for her husband. This girl then in turn grows up to be the traditional housewife. The other scenario would be a mother who tells her daughter that she is smart, pushes her to help her dad with the tools and outside work. Her dad teaches her how to change her own oil in her car. This girl then in turn grows up to be an engineer. Also, in a broader outreach, Martin Luther King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech encouraged society as a whole to communicate based on the content of the person and not the color.
We have just explained communication as transmission, interaction, transaction, and social construction. We all gave you examples of how these each work in the real world. Now we are going to test your knowledge with Kahoot.